Welcome to another episode of Literature Podcast. I'm Joanna.
And I'm Mich.
And today we are going to be discussing a genre of books that we typically don't cover, classics. I don't typically read a lot of classics. They're not my go-to. I like fantasy and horror that's more interesting and fun.
I mean, at some point in our lives, we've all probably read a few books that have been deemed classics. I've only read a few, to be honest. And I didn't even actually love all of the ones that I've read. But nevertheless, here's a few of the classics that we've read and either loved or hated. Doesn't really matter. All right. So my first one is going to be Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. This one I actually loved. I watched the movie when I was growing up and before reading the book, obviously. But it's just such a fun, magical story. These children are going through a difficult, warring time and are sent away from the city. They step through a magical wardrobe and adventure into unknown lands. They end up coming into some danger and being enslaved to the land. And with each other's help and with the return of Aslan, the great lion, and after a huge sacrifice that happens, they make it through. So since this is a children's book, I did expect this book to be more childish than it was. But I was surprised that it actually wasn't very childish. I actually really enjoyed reading it, but it was a super quick book to read, obviously, which was both great because I was able to finish it in an afternoon and annoying because I wanted more of it. And I felt like this is a classic that everyone at some point should pick up in their lives, even if you're older. Like C.S. Lewis once said, someday you will be old enough to start reading fairy tales again. So go for it.
I love that book, and I did love the movie. I remember in school watching it, and I was like, yes, this is actually something fun to watch.
I want to read the others. I only have that one currently. Oh, no, I have the Caspian one too, but I haven't read it yet. But I want to read the rest of them.
All right, so the first one on my list is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This one I actually enjoyed, and it was one of those ones where I picked it up thinking I wasn't going to enjoy it. I had to read it in high school, so I didn't pick to read it. But I actually really loved the feel and, like, the life of the rich 1920s kind of fun vibe to it. It kind of drew me in a little bit and made it interesting. But the characters and how they had their struggles regardless of money was really insightful for me at the time, because I grew up thinking that money could pretty much solve anything. Like, I was completely conditioned into thinking that a vast amount of money could make you happy, because even if money couldn't buy you actual happiness, you could buy things that in turn will make you happy, which we do see that in this book. But in the beginning of the book, you meet Jay Gatsby and his giant fancy house with his big fucking party with all these important fancy people. And, any kind of party favor you could ask for. He has, like, fountains and lots of alcohol that I couldn't afford. And he calls everyone old sport. And, like, that was something that I will forever remember about this book, was thinking, okay, how many times can you call someone old sport? Like, we got it. But in the book, you continue to see where things are missing in his life. Like, he can't buy the love of his life. He can't do anything. And pretty much all these rich people are just miserable. They're just miserable. Like, there's always something lacking. And then I can't really go into any of those things without spoiling it. Like, I literally can't go past, like, the beginning scene. But shit just kind of falls apart for everybody, to put it lightly. But I recommend reading it. I would like to reread it since, because it's been a long time, and it really covers a lot of the perspective of deterioration, hollowness of the American dream, and where does that actually leave you if you acquire those things.
I haven't read the book. I have it in my basement ready to read. I got it at the thrift store a couple of months ago. But I love the movie. It's a good movie.
When did the newer movie come out? Like 2014, 13, 14? I don't know. I watched it in theaters and
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I haven't watched it since. So
I watched it on TV. I flipped to it one day. It was on. It just started. I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Then I was like, oh my god, this is so fun.
Yeah, like the book has that same kind of fun, like, exciting kind
like
of
flapper and
it.
like
yes.
Yeah. All right, so my next one is going to be The Grimm's Fairy Tales by the Brothers Grimm, obviously. This is a collection of stories by the Brothers Grimm that are all classics in their own rights, filled with stories that we've all known since we were old enough to listen to, stories that we've grown up with, like Cinderella, Rapunzel, Rumpelstiltskin, and so many more unheard of ones. But these are a little bit darker than we remember hearing them, and they are infinitely more interesting too. This book was both fun and boring at the same time, just because the problem with a book filled with so many short stories is that you're bound to hate a few of them, and I really didn't like a couple of them. So it was both a pleasure and a nightmare to read. But if you love fairy tales, then you should absolutely add it to your TBR, because for those ones that are good, they're really good. So
Yeah, I feel like some of the stories in there are very memorable, and everything else kind of just goes to the wayside, you know?
mhm.
Um,
Like, okay, that was kind of pointless to read, But here's Rumpelstiltskin.
they're so gory and graphic. I love
I
them.
love them.
Like, I can't imagine being read these. Well, actually, I think I could, but I'd probably enjoy them more. But, hearing that as maybe a 5-year-old,
Oh, it's
like,
probably not for kids. Guys, don't read these books to your kids.
and if you do, they're graphic. I think in Germany they might. I mean, probably. I don't know. I had to read them in German back in the day before I ever read them in English. Like, I had no idea that they were so dark. And then I'm like translating it from German. I'm like, that's fucked. That's real fucked.
Wait, is this right, guys? Is this right?
Am I doing this right? Are we sure that's what that says? Okay. Alright, the next one on my list is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and this is hands down probably one of my favorite classics that we ever read in school, because it was actually interesting and it was written really well. But I really love Atticus Finch and the way he spoke to and treated his 2 children, Jem and Scout. Fuck me. But he's just an amazing father in person. I'm pretty sure that we covered him a little bit on the Father's Day episode, like way back in the day. But anyway, this book takes place in the 1930s, where racism is still very accepted in society, and if you're a person of color or someone who believed that people of color should have the same rights, well, you were looked down upon. But Atticus agrees to defend a black man named Tom Robinson, who is on trial for the supposed rape of a white woman. No one wanted to take his trial. No one wanted to take his side. No one wanted to defend him. And Atticus stood up and was like, I'm going to do this, even though he got a lot of backlash from society and a lot of people started treating him like shit, as well as his children. I like that this book shows that the mass thinking and beliefs of society can be unethical and that the law can match that corruption.
All right. So my next one is going to be Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. This is one of those classics that I admit that I honestly hated. Okay, so I'm not sure who decides what books count as classics, but whoever decided that this one should be one of them should be fired from that job. So I picked it up because, like Narnia, I heard it was one that everyone should read at least once in their lives. So I tried it out. Actually, me and my kids decided to read it together last summer. At the beginning of summer break, we all sat down and started reading it, and I was shocked by the whole dad heading out to kill the baby pig thing, and it worried my kids, and it immediately lost their attention. So without them, I continued reading, and it's quite a short book, so I was done in about 5 hours. But it was boring. It was a lackluster story. I didn't really understand the reason of the story. It's supposed to be about friendship, but I didn't get it. I didn't like it. There was just a lot of really weird, messed up messages I got from it. I was quite disappointed that everyone's like, ooh, it's a lovable classic, but honestly, I don't see how. So yeah, Charlotte's Web. Apparently not a fan.
I don't think I've read the book, and if I have, I straight up don't remember. It would have been a long time ago, but I remember the animated movie or whatever the hell, very briefly.
I never watched it.
I remember having to watch it and just not really caring. I won't bother picking it up. I will take
When it
your
comes
word
to
for
pig
it.
stories, I prefer Babe.
Babe. I
Babe.
remember that movie. Was there a second one?
Yes, I loved it. Babe Pig in the City.
Yes.
We should have a movie night.
Me and my babe.
Just Babe and Babe 2.
Babe and Babe 2. Alright, my next one is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I'm sure pretty much all of you know the general synopsis of Frankenstein, like who doesn't, but regardless, I'm gonna get into it. But in this book, we follow Victor Frankenstein and how he enters the College of Ingolstadt, where he becomes obsessed with learning the secret of what gives us life. Down the line, he's convinced that he knows what makes us animated. Technically, he's right. He figured it out. But his best plan of action was to seek out multiple body parts, stick that shit together like Lego, and zap some life into it. And lo and behold, it works. When he does manage to bring his creation to life, he's horrified of what he made. Like, he's like, oh, I'm in awe. Okay, I'm horrified. Like, I think you'd know what you're expecting when you just put dead body parts together, but, I could be wrong. So his creation decides to just up and leave his apartment because, Victor was horrified and just kind of left him there. And, when he comes back and the creature's gone, he decides the best thing to do is just go home to Geneva. Sounds like a great plan. But before he actually leaves where he is, he learns that his youngest brother has been murdered. Victor is convinced that it is done by the work of his monstrous science experiment, and to top off all that guilt, a kind girl who is adopted by the Frankenstein family is executed for the murder of his little brother. And she didn't do it. But with this, Victor does what he does best, and he leaves. And he takes a vacation to the mountains. He has a running away problem. But while he's in the mountains, he's approached by his creation, and shit just continuously goes down from there when he can't fulfill what his creation wants him to fulfill, and just more questionable decisions are made, and we just get to see Victor's life crumble into shit. Fun. It's fun, entertaining read.
I've never read Frankenstein.
Oh.
Again, I have it. I buy a lot of classics. I just don't read them.
I have 2 copies of Frankenstein. I have the Barnes & Noble leather edition, the little one, and then I found a graphic novel.
That's cool.
I can't remember who illustrated it, but it's like dead on of what the book is, and it's awesome. I'll have to show you when you're here.
Read that first. All right, so my next one is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. So I'm bunching these two together because my copy actually has both of them mashed into one. However, I did like one better than the other. So these stories are filled with whimsy and creative genius, in my opinion. If you know me at all, you know that I absolutely love anything to do with Alice in Wonderland. And it just intrigues me. And maybe it's the crazily wild world that it takes you through, or the superbly colorful cast. I'm not sure. It's just something pulls me in fully about these whole stories. So I absolutely loved the first half of my book, which is Adventures in Wonderland. It just felt like the right amount of crazy and bizarre with a bunch of whimsical thrown in, which is exactly how I've always felt about Alice in Wonderland. It takes you to the edge of reality and to the edge of impossibleness, and it was just fantastic. But the second half, Through the Looking Glass, that's where things got weird. Don't get me wrong, the Tweedles are in that one, and I do love the Tweedles, but the rest of the story was so out there and barely made any sense to me, which I know is kind of the point of it. You're just really not supposed to make sense. But I believe that there's a line between like quirky and absolute nonsense. And I didn't even know what half of the book meant. I was confused. I didn't really enjoy reading that much of the second book. And I was quite disappointed by the fact that I didn't like it. So to me, I would definitely say that Adventures in Wonderland is the best.
I haven't read Through the Looking Glass. But
Oh, really?
yeah. Mine are mashed together, too. But I just haven't continued on to the next part. But I've read a lot of that, of people being confused, like, what the fuck is this? But
Like I've watched the, what is it, the 1998 movie. I don't know if you've seen that one. Where it actually has like both of the stories mixed into it. Like it's not the cartoon version, it's the like a life version, like a real life version. It's one of my favorites. But and it's actually very accurate to the books, but it's very like, okay, what the heck's going on? You know? Because it's both of them put together.
I think maybe the second book is one of those things where you have to be on something to fully get it.
Maybe. You have to, like, hit a specific level of, like, highness.
I got it.
Oh my god, it all makes sense.
All right, the next one on my list is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and I wasn't a fan of this book at all. In this book, we get to meet Hester, and in the beginning of this book, we see her with this giant letter A on her chest to symbolize her as being an adulterer. And she must wear it to show her shame to literally everyone in her society. Sounds fun. But in the past, while Hester was in America, her husband was lost at sea for a short time. I'm not exactly sure how long, but long enough for her to think that he's not coming back. So, you know, she has an affair with another man and she has a baby, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, my husband's back. Fuck. You know? So that's what happens to her, and because of that mistake, she has to forever show her shame for the rest of her life and her daughter Pearl's life. And that's what's expected of her, but I don't know. I had some interesting concepts to it. I like the message and the theme of it, but the writing and the story in general fell really flat for me.
I have never read that book. Alright, so my next one is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is another one of those classics that I read because the whole world was like, oh my god, you have to read it. And I did like the movie, the Keira Knightley one, just to be clear. So I figured that I would give it a go. And I actually really loved it. So when Elizabeth Bennet meets Mr. Darcy, she's repelled by his overbearing pride and prejudice towards her family. But the Bennet girls are in need of financial security in the shape of husbands. So when Darcy's friend, the affable Mr. Bingley, forms an attachment to Jane, Darcy becomes increasingly hard to avoid. Polite society will be turned upside down in this witty drama of friendship, rivalry, and love. It was a little bit difficult to get into this book at first because of the old style English. But that only took a few chapters before my mind was able to wrap around what they were saying. And honestly, I am obsessed with this era. It has always fascinated me. I've always loved, like, the properness of it, and it's just so different than what we're used to. It's so complex and tedious, yet also very fancy and elegant and quite simple if you think about it. But the book really captures all of those feelings. The beginning was a little slow and hard to get into, but by like the middle and the end, it really picked up and I couldn't put it down. It was a really well-written book that captivates you and draws you into the story. It was fun, clever, romantic, and so much more. Like, I get that this is a classic. It is a classic for a reason, and I would absolutely suggest it. I mean, if you haven't read it yet, and if you have, read it again, because, I mean, it's worth it. But it's an amazing book.
I haven't read that one yet. Nor have I seen the movies.
Okay.
Like I legit, Pride and Prejudice, I finally bought it at Barnes & Noble because they, leather classics editions for $10.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to finally figure out what this story is about. And I never did. This is the most I know about Pride and Prejudice is what you've just said. Because I just
love it. You haven't seen the movie?
No, okay. You know that I suck at watching movies. Like, I suck so bad at watching movies. I watch the same thing over and over and over again, and then I don't touch anything else. I'm horrible.
Okay, well, we'll add that to our movie night. Babe in Pride and Prejudice.
We're gonna have so many movies on this one movie night that we have. That's
we'll
gonna
watch
take
the
2
Alice
years.
in Wonderland too.
2-year long movie night.
There we go.
Alright, the last one on my list is 1984 by George Orwell. 1984 shows London, England of what it could look like if it were ran by a totalitarian government. Their leader goes by someone called Big Brother. No one actually knows who he is or even what he looks like. But all over the city, there's these posters letting you know that Big Brother's watching you. It's known that the government is watching literally every single thing that you do. It doesn't matter if you're walking in the street, if you're in your own home, the government's watching you. They're legit fucking watching you and waiting for you to do something wrong. They can watch you through your television screen, which is really scary to think about, and you're not allowed to even turn off your TV. That's illegal. And if that happens, you're going to be sent to a camp, or you're going to get killed, whatever the fuck they decide. Fucking horrifying society. You're not allowed to have close friends. You're not allowed to have romantic relationships with other people. You're not even allowed to have a diary. That's illegal. It's one of those societies where you can't do anything. You're not really allowed to live. And if you're caught doing literally anything, it's just automatic labor camp or they kill you. There's no good options. The things you are allowed to do are watch political programming and propaganda and serve your government in any way, shape, or form that you can. There's also a random war going on that no one knows anything about. At all. There's just random bombs will go off in the street, and that's what people know. But past that, they don't know what it's about. They don't know what the purpose of it is. It's just a dangerous society that they live in. And we get to follow Winston Smith, and he's this kind of middle-aged man. This is this only society he's known, and he ends up falling in love. Not a great idea. And then, because he is doing something illegal, and because it's he's not happy with his life. He also has a diary, by the way, so he could get killed for that. But now he has a diary and he's in love. So these two things, he's I'm going to be a rebel now. But that does not go well. He associates with the wrong people to have these conversations. And yeah, because of his attempt to be a rebel and getting arrested, a lot of good shit gets taken from him, which there really isn't a whole lot of good shit in his life, but you just get to kind of see what the fuck happens when you break the law, and his life sucks. I'm not gonna spoil it because it's so fucking good, but it's really fun. It's a really uneasy read. But I could see myself reading this more than once in my life again. It's just a fucked up society. It's a fucked up government. And it really makes you think of, what if all of these things were... What if someone had total control of every movement you made? And it's a scary read of what if we lived in that society.
Yeah.
I'm even wearing my 1984 shirt today. Big Brother's watching you. But that was all we had for today's episode. What are classic novels that you guys like? Let us know in the comments.
If you'd like to get more lit, be sure to subscribe to us on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or Castbox. All of our other social media will be linked below.
If you liked this episode, be sure to give us a like or rate our podcast. It really helps us to keep doing what we love. Until next time, bye.
Bye.